What's up my loves, my name is Paige, this is Pages with Paige, and today we're going to be doing my August wrap up. Whew! Oh, ha! I'm so proud of how August went. I felt like I got my reading mojo back even though I was sick, and that's probably half the reason I've read as much of these as I did, but I really just want to share the love and talk through how these fulfill prompts for Ketchupathon and Pickpongathon. And so we've got 18 books, so grab yourself a cup of tea, drink of water, whatever you need, and let's dive in. First things first are my statistics. As I said, I read 18 books in the month of August, which totaled to 5,926 pages. Technically, I did have enough time to read something else and put it over that 6,000 page. But I ended up not, because then I would have hit 19 and then I just would have wanted to keep going to 20, and I just, no. We hit 5,926 pages, what the fuck? My average rating was a 4.25, with my average pages per day equating around 191, and my average page per book was 329 pages long. In terms of genre, we had quite the range. There was 1 classic, 6 contemporary, 7 fantasies, 1 magical realism, 1 mystery, and 2 non-fictions. The formats were shock horror for me. There was 1 ebook, 3 ebook and audio combos, 9 physical, and only 5 physical audio. Just normally physical and audio are my tops, not my... In terms of age range, I had 6 adult, 9 YA, 2 middle grade, and 1 children. My ratings, I gave 4 5 stars, 2 4.5s, 11 4 stars, and 1 3.5. In terms of standalones versus series, I read 10 standalones, which was great, and I read 8 books that were part of series. 7 of those were starting new series though. Technically 2 of those are manga, and I don't actually count starting those as a series. It's just something that's ongoing. It's not on my list of series, but still that's 5 new series that I've started, which, Paige, what are you doing? My biggest book was Magic by Angie Sage, and my smallest was My Sister Daisy. My listening hours equated to 38.6 hours as well. So into the books. So the first thing I read was a children's picture book, and that was My Sister Daisy by Adria Carlson, illustrated by Linus Curie. So this was a beautiful picture book looking at the brother of a transgendered child. And whilst I'm not Own Voices, so like, please go check out Own Voices, I wanted to at least review it and put it out there so Own Voices reviewers could actually hear about it and hopefully find it and review it and give it what love it deserves. Personally, I thought it was a really beautiful picture book. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a very touching, wholesome, just exploration of dealing with having a transgendered sibling, and how as kids it's like, but you're my brother, and then coming to accept that they're now your sister, and just the progression. It was based off their family's real experiences, and I think it was really beautiful and just a very positive book. So I would love for more Own Voices reviewers to get their hands on an ARC or finished copy when it comes out. It comes out on the 1st of September, which is today that I'm filming this. Technically, you'll be seeing this on the 2nd, but so it came out today. I definitely would encourage people to look over it. A lot of ratings have been the 4 and 5 star, majority 5 star, so I hope that it continues to get some love, because I think it could be a really great resource to have in schools. Next up, I read Kindred by Octavia Butler, and I'm giving this 5 stars. Holy dooly, I need a physical copy. I need to go through, find those quotes, tab the shit out of this. It was amazing. I was captivated from the get-go. The sci-fi elements of the time travel was so fascinating. I'm really not a big time travel person, but the way that this was done was so ingenious and so captivating that I was absolutely gripped. It was a wonderful book. It was so hard to read, but absolutely fantastic, and I think it is one of those that is a necessary read just to experience the heart-wrenching but wonderful craftsmanship that this is. The next book was my buddy read book, and that was The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth, and I gave this a 4.5 4-star. It was close to a 5, just not quite. So Cameron is discovering her sexuality, and night that her parents die, she had been kissing a girl, so she feels a lot of grief tied into that. Throughout the progression of the book, she does end up at a conversion camp after her conservative aunt finds out about a relationship that she's been having, and it sort of deals with Cameron's coming to terms with who she is. I had really great discussion on it. It's hard for me to put into words what it is because the main action or progression doesn't really happen until midway through the book. The first half is getting to know Cameron, exploring her growing up a little bit, and then it happens. So I found that it was a really engaging read. I had a lot of fun. Cameron was a delightful character. One thing that we agreed on though was that the ending was something to be desired, but still a really enjoyable read. Next up, I read With the Falling of the Dusk by Stan Grant, and I gave this 4 stars. Stan Grant's writing just absolutely does wonders for me. This is looking at chronicling the world and how we've gotten into the position that we are now. So key political and social players that have led China to be the way that China is, the Middle East to be the way that the Middle East is, Western culture, how Western culture has gotten to where it is, and sort of tying them all together to explain how we are at a absolute point of crisis. I think the descriptions of West exploration for dominance and power in comparison to a civilization was absolutely fantastic, but it just didn't hit me in the same way that Talking to My Country in Australia Day did. I suppose because it's not hitting home to me, it is hitting home in a global perspective, which is great, and I think it's a really important book, but at the same time it didn't have that resonance with me that Talking to My Country did. So 4 stars, but absolutely if you want to learn more about like the world and how we've gotten to the point that we have, looking at like the end of history, the rise of liberal democracy, and then China's ascent and authoritarianism, that sort of concepts. Very fascinating. Next I read Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams, and holy shit, I'm so annoyed at myself for keeping this on my shelves for so long. This is following Queenie, a strong protagonist trying to navigate the world, and she is trying to juggle all these different things. I loved Queenie's character. She was very raw and honest and real, and it was really lovely seeing someone's perspective, and the audiobook is fantastic. It really hammers home the characters and their voices, and I just really enjoyed it. It was really hard for Queenie going through what she had to go through, but it was absolutely wonderful, and I would highly recommend this. Next we read Dig by A.S. King. This was an experience. I have obviously vlogs for the entirety of the month. I'm not sure when my last one's going up, sorry, but we will get to it eventually. This, I didn't know what to expect going in. I knew that it was weird, and I knew that it was based about potatoes, but not actually about potatoes, but I didn't know that at the beginning of it, going in blind was going to be an acid trip. I did not read the back, and my progression of reading this was interesting. And then I read the back when I had finished reading it. I was like, oh, that puts a lot more context behind it. But it didn't hinder my reading not knowing the back, and it's one of those books where I think maybe it would be better to go in blind and just ride that acid trip and then read the back and go, ah. So this is looking at toxic culture of the affluent white supremacy, and it's a lot of family dynamics. Very interesting concept. It's sort of laid out as like part 1, introduction, cast in order of appearance, and then it goes through, and the chapters are very short. The ending was fantastic. I gave this a 4 star, I think because it took me so long to get into it, but that wasn't because I didn't know what was happening. It was more just my reading just wasn't vibing it, but once I got into it, it was really, really good. So definitely check it out if you like weird. I think A.S. King is known for their weird. Give it a go. It's not, if you think it's going to be about potatoes, you'd be right, but you'd also be very wrong. Next I read Card Captor Sakura Clear Card Volume 1, which is a continuation on from the Card Captor Sakura series. So I didn't realize that, and I thought this was just remarketing it. No, this is its new story. We're following on after the events of the original manga, which I am going to work on getting my hands on because I want them so desperately before I continue on with this. But it was an absolute joy being back with Sakura and just getting to experience the world again and the new issues that are going to go down. I think for me, I need to reread the originals though, just so then I have that foundation and then can go into this and be like, ah yes, I remember everything. I think because they are manga, I'm going to be more inclined to reread them rather than rereading a series, but this is definitely something that I'm very excited about. I gave it 5 stars. I just love everything about this. Next up, I read Magic by Angie Sage. This is the first in the Septimus Heap series. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars, and I think a lot of my commentary on this is dealing with the fact that it's a very predictable plot. It's a middle grade fantasy series, middle grade YA, bordering on the edge. More YA than middle grade, but still it's right in that edge zone, which is why I think a lot of people don't like it, because they feel that it's too young. But I loved this. I thought that the story was engaging, the characters were interesting, and yes, it was a cliche plot, but if you've read any young middle grade YA fantasy, you're going to have read this story before, but they do it in a way that is interesting and engaging, so I don't feel like that's a bad thing. If you're wanting a chosen one sort of family dynamics adventure story, definitely check this out. It was a lot of fun. It's just one of those that I'm just like, I don't know why, but I'm oddly protective about it. Next up, I read Cinder by Marissa Meyer, and I also gave this a 4 stars. I found it a really engaging and quick read. Again, similar, it's a YA story, retelling of Cinderella, so I knew the story, how it was gonna go. There were elements that I was like, I see you. But obviously, like, I'm a vivacious reader. I'm going to pick up on things anyway. I know a lot of people in the Discord group, because it is part of the Lunaralong, which is hosted by Amy from A Star Reads and Danielle from Bookchara, also had the same sort of commentary, that it was just a fun read. If you go in expecting more, you're not going to be in love with it, but if you go in expecting a fun YA fantasy sci-fi, you're probably going to enjoy it. Next up, I read If Cats Disappeared from the World by Genki Karamura, and this was an adorable, wholesome read. Ash chose this for partner pick for me, and it's definitely a bittersweet book. I really enjoyed the narrative and how it's different days, and each day the devil comes and is like, okay, what are you going to remove from your life to get an extra day? It was a really beautiful read. I loved seeing the discussions that were going on with the protagonist, and just how important the different little aspects of life are, and how if we remove things from our life that we might be affected in ways that we wouldn't actually think. Next up, I read The Comfort Book by Matt Haig, and I read this at the perfect time. I gave this 4 stars. It's just full of anecdotes that are beautiful and funny, and just a really enjoyable experience. I had just been very, very ill and faced a phobia of mine, so this was definitely read at the right time to just sort of support me in that, and I really, really enjoyed it. This is my first dip into Matt Haig's writing, and I definitely know that I'm going to enjoy more from him. So if you're wanting something that's wholesome, anecdotal, and just a lot of fun, definitely would recommend checking this out. Next up, we have The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I gave this 3.5 stars, 3.54. This is following Jude and Carden, and it's a booktube staple, so I feel like I won't need to go into too much detail. Essentially, I'm concerned for Jude's well-being, and it's a ride. I didn't dislike it by any means. I thought it was quite a interesting read. I liked the political dynamics. I was listening to the audiobook while playing The Sims, so like my attention wasn't fully there, but what can you do? I think that there is potential to take this series in a very interesting way, although I have heard that the last one is not on par with what people were hoping, but the second one is right up there, so we'll see how it goes. I'm definitely continuing on with the series. I enjoy Holly Black's writing, and I just want to keep going, mostly because I need to know if Jude gets out okay, because right now she is in situations that are a bit odd. Next up, I finally read Frost Heart 2 Escape from Aurora by Jamie Littler, and I gave this 5 whole stars. It is absolutely beautiful and fills my soul with so much happiness. I cannot get over the fact of this narrative. I just love everything about it. The illustrations are beautiful and funny, and the story was great. I loved seeing how Ash is continuing on in his journey, and I need the 3rd book now. The ending, fuck my soul. Yeah, that was a time. I am so invested in these characters, and I'm not ready for it to end. Next up, I read Children of the Whales by Abby Umeda. I gave 4 stars, and it was a really interesting read. I'm very curious to see what the fuck is going on, because the ending was very different from how we started. So I have no idea what is happening, and I'm not mad about that. I think it was a really interesting take on using the sand as water, and I just want to know. I'm very, very curious. It's definitely hooked me in, and I think that the different elements of the story just keep you captivated. Next up, I listened to A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This was a really enjoyable Hades and Persephone retelling that I gave 4 stars. So it's set in like a modern New Athens, and it's a college town. Our protagonist, Persephone, is looking to become a journalist. She's been locked away in Demeter's greenhouse and finally able to step into the outside world with the mortals, and more shit goes down. I am very invested in seeing how this plays out. I want to know what's going on. I have a soft spot for those Hades characters. Come at me, it's fine. I think that Hades was excellently done in this, and I do have Neon Gods on my TBR for this month, so I'm very curious to get that oversaturation of Hades and Persephone romances, because yes. Also, sex scenes were, I don't know, nothing can beat a Katie Roberts sex scene, mostly because they use terms like her heat, and not frequently, but enough. It's like, there are moments when I'm like, I am uncomfortable listening to this because it is not realistic. It didn't work for the situations for me personally. I still enjoyed the smut, like it was smutty and I love smut, but I think in terms of the quality of smut, it wasn't top tier, it was next tier down. Next up, I read Girl Unframed by Deb Coletti, and I was petrified going into this book. I am now, once I finish my assignment, going to buy me a finished copy so I can tab the shit out of it and make sure that the photos on my phone can be deleted. Essentially, Deb Coletti knows how to write into my feminist soul, and I will give you a brief look. So all of those are quotes that I want to tab. So I took photos as I was listening to it as well and reading along, so then I can go back and tab it because I'm definitely getting my own copy. I'm giving this a 4.5. I think the main reason I'm not giving it a 5-star is because I fucking hate her mother. And you can have unlikable characters, that's fine. Doesn't usually affect my rating, but the mom was just so disgusting in her belief in being famous and being that, oh, I need a man to look after me, but don't you dare need a man to look after you, you be independent. But then the mum can be totally independent, she just chooses to be reliant on abusers, and it's just a very interesting dynamic, and I think I know how Deb meant it, I just couldn't get behind it. I really just didn't like her mum. She reminded me of another family member of mine who I cut out of my life a long time ago. I hated having to be involved in them. I hated feeling it necessary to call them family. So yeah, I think because it hit so close to home, I couldn't vibe with it. Does that make sense? It's exceptionally well written. Deb's quotes just hit my soul in a new way. It was just that one character that really I had to grit my teeth anytime that I was listening to them talk. 4.5, absolutely amazing. I can't wait to get my own copy. I am gonna get this hardcover. There is a beautiful paperback, but I think I'm gonna go with this and have it matched to A Heart in the Body of the World, and I can't wait to tab the shit out of it. Next, for the last read book club hosted by Mel, Elle, and Lana, I read Every Breath by Ellie Marnie. This is a Sherlock inspired, the characters are mentioned in this mystery YA set in Australia, and our protagonist is Rachel Watts. Our Sherlock is James Mycroft, and so they call each other Mycroft and Watts. The Sherlock references got a bit on the nose towards the end, but I appreciated what it was trying to do. I think it's a very fun YA mystery, and I really enjoyed Mycroft's eccentricities. So when I was reading it, I was like, Jesus Christ, I could not imagine doing this. And looked at their ages and they're 17. And then I was like, I can't imagine doing that as a 17-year-old. I can't imagine that any 17-year-old would be like that. And I was talking to Ash and I was like, oh, nope, that's spot on. That is definitely how 17-year-olds acted. I had just forgotten. Watts and Mycroft are trying to solve a murder of their friends, and it was just a really interesting dynamic. Rachel has moved from the country to the city, which I loved because I moved from the city to the country. I can't stand the city, and Rachel wants to move back country, but her family can't afford it. So I was like, oh my god, like I 100% feel how she's feeling in wanting to be in the country rather than the city, which was a really nice, relatable experience. And this is set in Melbourne. I'm not too familiar with Melbourne. I've only been once, I think, but there are staple things that are very Melbourne-like, and having been there and done said Melbourne-like things, I could definitely feel it. I could also see why people from Melbourne would appreciate this more though. And finally, book number 18 and 100, book number 100 for this year is The Sad Ghost Club by Liz Meddings. I read this on the 31st in one sitting. It was a lot of fun. I couldn't decide what I wanted to read, and so I just decided, let's read the last graphic novel that I own and have not read. This is a very cute YA graphic novel looking at dealing with anxiety and depression. Our protagonist Ghost gets invited to a party and there's a lot of conflict about dealing with it. They go to the party and meet another ghost, and they sort of go for a walk and talk about how they feel, why they are ghosts, and just sort of develop a bond. And it was really, really beautiful. I think that it would be great to have in high school libraries just for any teens that are feeling that way. I think I could have definitely benefited from it because of the different discussions that are in it. It just resonated with how I was feeling as a teen. I definitely think this is like a really great YA graphic novel. This is my 100th read. I'm so happy. It was a glorious little book, and I'm excited because I think there is another one coming. I'm not sure though, so it is technically a standalone at the moment, but we shall see if that changes. Haha, can't even get it in frame. So these are the 14 out of 18 things that I read in the month of August. Holy shit. My wrist is breaking. Sorry for the angle change, but I forgot that I needed to sum up Pickpongathon and Ketchupathon. So for Pickpongathon, there were 9 prompts, technically 10 prompts, but you only needed to hit 9, and so I'm gonna talk through those really quickly. The first one was blind pick, and originally I said I was gonna read Serious Moonlight, but I ended up not wanting to get to it, so I decided to pick up Every Breath by Alyce and fill this instead because I went in completely blind, not knowing what it was. I just picked it up because it was part of the book club. One of my selected prompts was newest published, and I went with The Comfort Book by Matt Haig. This was published this year, close enough to publication date for this to count. The next was a poll pick, and I had put one on my Twitter, and I ended up going with Frostart 2, Escape from Aurora. Technically, I forgot to put the 2, so it was Frostart. I was going to read Frostart, then changed my mind and just read Frostart 2 because I couldn't fit this into my September TBR. So that is poll pick. For under 300 pages, I read Cardcaptor Sakura Clear Card Volume 1. For big book, I read Magic by Angie Sage. Technically, Krystal said this could be a book over 400 pages, but for me, a big book's over 500, so I wanted to make sure that I hit that. Then my next one was a book from a friend's wish list, or technically this would have fulfilled on someone's worst list, and that's The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This was on my friend Caitlyn's from Mad Cheshire Rabbit's wish list, and also on Ashleigh from a Frolic Through Fiction's worst list. Then for partner pick, Ash picked If Cats Disappeared from the World by Junki Karamura, so that is fulfilling that. For YA fantasy, I read Cinder by Marissa Meyer, and for a 5-star prediction, I read With the Falling of the Dust by Stan Grant. Unfortunately, this was only a 4-star, but I still absolutely adore this. Then for Ketchupathon, for Ketchup, you needed to read a middle grade, Frostart 2. For Worcestershire, you needed to read a classic, and I read Kindred by Octavia Butler. For Salt, this was like a controversial, or you weren't sure if you're gonna like it sort of thing. I read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Mayo was again a 5-star prediction, so same as Pickpongathon, I went with The Falling of the Dust by Stan Grant. Horseradish is a bittersweet book, or a book that you think will make you cry, and I went If Cats Disappeared from the World. It was bittersweet, didn't make me cry though, and that's fine. It was very wholesome. And then Barbecue, a book with outdoor vibes, I went with The Miseducation of Cameron Post. There are tree lines, it's set at a camp and has a lot of outdoorsy elements to it, so I think that fits in as well. So out of all the books that I read, these were the ones that I had going towards the 2 readathons that I participated in for August. I'll leave a link to the announcement videos just so you can get a feel for what they were, because they were fantastic readathons. Krystal from Book Reviews was doing Pickpongathon for her celebrations. Absolutely fantastic. I loved being able to chill with her, and watching her do Pickpong live was fucking hilarious. And then having Alyce from the Bumbling book blogger do Ketchupathon and have the badges is just fantastic, and I really, really appreciate all the effort that both of them went into to make such fantastic readathons. I'm curious to see what my pile's like for the readathons in September. Yep, this is gonna hurt. Let me know in the comments below how your reading went in August. Did you participate in any readathons? I know I missed out on a few, but I'm really happy with the 2 that I participated in. If you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe, and I will hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!